Hi, it's me, Jackie Turner. We're still reading Bending Willow, and we're all the way up to chapter 14. And the last time the girls had met Jack, and he was going to take them to Wendell, so let's see what happens next. It was no use trying to talk to Jack. Riley gave it one more try after he turned onto the highway and left his blinker on. She shouted and pointed at the blinker. But between the wind howling through the windows and his deafness, she couldn't make herself heard, so she finally stopped trying. Jack seemed content with the silence. He was probably used to it. After a time, Mia's grip loosened on Riley's hand, and Riley realized her sister was asleep. How anyone could sleep when they might die in a fiery crash was beyond her. What if a cow wandered onto the road? What if a tractor pulled out or they hit a pothole? Any one of those things could kill them. She barely breathed during the 30 miles to Wendell. When Jack screeched into the parking lot of an old store in the tiny town, Riley breathed a huge sigh of relief. Was this Wendell? Mia jolted awake as dust boiled up around them. "Let me buy you a Coke. It's a real blazer out there," Jack said. Maybe it wasn't Wendell after all. They slowly followed Jack into the tiny store. Riley stared at the fans blowing all the hot air around. "Why don't they have air conditioning?" Mia asked. Riley shook her head and put her finger to her lips. She brushed a fly off her arm and then another off her face. "Hey, Jack, who you got there?" yelled a friendly-looking man behind the counter. "I got me a couple of strays," Jack said with a grin. "Thought they might need a Coke after that dusty ride from town." The man took 2 Cokes from a refrigerator and placed them on the counter. "They probably need more than a Coke after riding with you, Jack." Both men laughed. Riley noticed that Jack kept his eyes on the man's face when they talked, and he seemed to be able to hear better that way. Maybe that's why he couldn't hear her in the car, Riley thought. He couldn't read my lips. Jack turned to Riley. "What's the address you're looking for?" he asked. Riley pulled the worn envelope out of her back pocket and handed it to Jack. Her nose tickled from drinking the Coke too fast. Mia began to wander around the small store as Jack studied the address. Then he leaned over the counter and showed it to the friendly man. The store clerk's eyebrows went up, causing deep lines like the spines of stacked books to form across his forehead. Then he and Jack exchanged a look. Riley's heart sank. Was this the end of the road? Did the whole town know that her father didn't want her? Had they been warned to send her away if she came looking for him? Jack asked, "So you're going to see your grandma, eh?" Riley glanced at him, confused for a moment. She'd been so worried about what was going to happen, she'd forgotten the lie she'd told in the thrift store. Jack had to have heard her talking to the clerk. She hadn't mentioned visiting a grandma during the ride, had she? "Yes," Riley said, her head down. Then she remembered he couldn't hear her that way, and she looked into his eyes. "Yes." "Well, this here envelope is addressed to Blaine Baker," he said, a question in his voice. He waited. Riley didn't know how much to tell Jack, so she just nodded. "Blaine doesn't live here anymore," Jack stated matter-of-factly. His words sent an avalanche of pain and dread tumbling down to crush Riley's soul. She suddenly felt exhausted, as if all the energy she had expended to get them here left her body all at once. She felt Mia slip up beside her, taking her hand. Of all the things she had imagined, her father not wanting her father telling her to go back home, her father not believing that he was even her father, she never thought that they had come all this way only to find out he wasn't here. Her eyes filled with tears, and her throat closed up. She blinked rapidly, not wanting Mia to see her pain. Jack continued. He moved up north in the Sawtooth about 10 years back. Married a cute little gal up there. The Sawtooth. Suddenly Riley felt like she'd been pushed as high as she could go on a swing, and if she let go at the right time, she would actually fly. She'd gotten them this far. Maybe she could get them to the Sawtooth, even though she had no idea where or what that was. All she had to do was hang on a little longer, though her whole body trembled at the thought. Your grandma's here, though. The reason this letter didn't get to her is 'cause the address is off a bit. She has a farm down the road. She know you're coming? The question took a minute to sink in. Her grandma? Riley had another grandmother? Maybe they wouldn't have to walk to the Sawtooth after all. Riley was so relieved she almost forgot she'd lied to Jack in the first place. Sure, she said, she's expecting us. Jack and the man behind the counter exchanged another look. Riley squeezed Mia's hand, took the oversized cowboy hat off her sister's head, and handed it to the man behind the counter. Well, pile into the old rocket then, Jack said. We'll be there in a flash. See you later, Toby. Jack nodded to the other man, opened the door, and headed out into the blasting heat. Toby called a hearty goodbye, but Riley's mind was still reeling. They were going to meet their grandma. Her heart skipped a beat as she and Mia shared a grin as they skipped out the door. That's the end of the chapter. I hope you're enjoying listening, and soon we'll be on to chapter 15. Bye.